Guys, thanks so much for spending some time with me this morning. Hopefully, I'm going to share some things that are of value to you and you can take back to your laboratory. We're going to talk about putting it all together today. All right, I run a little laboratory in Yucaipa, California, Sunrise Dental Laboratory. We're going to talk a little bit today about full arch solutions. I insert this little stupid thing because my son made it and I find it fun. And it's more about, digital technology and how many different ways you can get around and do fun stuff with it. So everybody has to have one of these obligatory slides that they pontificate about how badass they are. So this is mine. If we talk a little bit about who I am, I mentioned I do run a little laboratory in Yucaipa. I've started way back in the day of 1985. I stumbled into a dental laboratory, applied for a job for a driver. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a young punk kid, left home early, thought I had all the world ahead of me to figure out exactly what the world was going to give me. And somehow I fell into the dental laboratory industry. And I stayed with this lab for about 5 years and decided that I wanted to make something that resembled the look of a denture. I definitely didn't know what a denture was at that time, but it took 5 years and I thought I knew everything. Today, after 38 years in this trade, I've learned a little bit about the clinical side of dentistry. I think it's very important that the best techs out there have a better understanding of the challenges that our clients, thank you, my friend, that our clients face on a daily basis and how we can aid them in solving some of those problems. As mentioned, I specialize in implant dentistry. If it doesn't have titanium or a hole in it of some sort, it's not something that I generally like to do. I think that today in this commodity-styled trade that we live in, we got to find something that is going to give us longevity. And implant dentistry definitely has helped me with that. We exclusively use digital workflows in my laboratory. While my analog background has helped me overcome some of the challenges with digital, digital has been a tool that has allowed me to be way more efficient in my workflows. I am a father. I have 2 wonderful kids that are grown, a husband with a wife that somehow puts up with me. I have 2 wonderful dogs, and as Stephanie mentioned, I love to play golf. That's my second hobby. This quote here, it resonates with everything about me, not just my lab, but myself as a person. And if you read through it in your own mind's eye, you can somewhat get the power and the passion that I exude when I read this stuff. Every one of us, every single day, fails in some way. And we don't always reflect back on that failure. Sometimes we only want to think about how great we are and how amazing the things that we've done in a day are. But you're going to learn more by examining your failures. So I say fail better. So we're going to talk a little bit about Lego dentistry and more or less layers and how we maintain this stuff and do fun stuff with it. So today's agenda, we've already got through the boring part of me. We're going to talk a little bit about the unsung heroes of full arch dentistry. We're going to talk about what I call the one coordinate challenge and how important it is and how once you master that understanding, your path in digital dentistry is going to be quite a bit easier. We're going to talk about bars and sleeves. It's the new hot item. And this is my favorite part. We're going to finish up with a case that I've done from start to finish, a very unique case. And I'm going to share every good, bad, and ugly point of the restoration, and hopefully it will inspire you in some way, shape, or form. But most important, guys, you're here on a Saturday. You're giving up your free time to try to learn it. Hey, Jack. I think that it's super important for you to recognize how fortunate each and every one of us are, and I always like to say, smile and be happy. You get to choose what you do in this life. You're here for a reason, and I'm happy to see you. In all my lectures, I don't think I've ever done a shout out to a past great. Dr. Carl Misch is a mentor of mine, and he's passed on now. But I can tell you, this gentleman changed my belief system in dentistry. He was really one of the first clinicians that I heard speak on the team approach to dentistry, literally giving the platform to the technician, the surgeon, and the restorative doctor to be completely equal in their roles in the treatment. He empowered technicians to really own their part of the equation. And that to me resonated, and I thought, if there's one guy like this that's talking this way, there's got to be many more clients that really want my input. They need to have me contribute in more than just filling a script, filing it out, putting it in a box and sending it away. I want to own that case in a manner that is going to be different, right? So this guy, amazing. If you haven't read any of his books, I have every one of them. I've read them countless times. There's stuff in there that holds completely true today. Even with all the new stuff that we're doing today, the over-engineering approach to dentistry, he's an amazing man, and literally, I think you should review his literature. And this is his classification system. I'm sure most of you guys know some of these things and the terminology associated with this. This slide comes from Google University, and I snagged it off there because I'm too lazy to make something like this. So let's talk about it. And specifically, today, most of you are very familiar with the FP3 restoration. That's the traditional fixed hybrid that most people are doing today, right? It replaces gum and teeth, and it's supporting in a very specific manner for fixed restoration. What's in vogue today is, obviously, people are trying to come back to removing less bone in the restoration. They're doing FP1s. And why FP1s are an amazing restoration when planned properly, they're very difficult to do. The emergence for these cases have to be spot on. If the implants are off axis just a little bit, the emergence profile is going to be a problem. You can see even in this flipping photo, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult to do. And today, unlike roundhouses that we did in yesteryear, where we used to wax up 3 ounces of metal and chuck it and hopefully it wouldn't warp, we got digital paths to be able to do this. And with that, we have a better chance of success and passivity. But there's a reason why most FP1s today are being segmented. They're doing it in three bridges. 6 fixtures, 3 bridges, and it's easy. And it's repairable because if one part fails, you just make another bridge for that, not the whole prosthetic. But it's still underused because it's difficult. It's harder. But it should be considered. But today, I thought it would be fun to talk specifically about the RP4, RP5 restoration to start. I think these get very little love. So the first thing I'm going to ask in here, is there any redheads in this room today? Any step kids? All right. So why is this? You got to realize, why is this stigma there, guys? I'm sorry if I offended you, I'm sorry. But so there's stigmas, right? What are they perceived as, right? Economy restorations, right? Grandma's teeth. Cheap plastic. Can you imagine going to a doctor's office and having the doctor present to this patient, she's going to spend a bunch of money putting implants in, doing all this stuff, and eventually they're going to say, no, I think we're going to do a denture on this. That's hard. It's difficult. But sometimes that's the right thing to say to these patients. So let's look at it from a different standpoint. Why are they hard to do? Well, there's no space. Most of the time we're running out of space, especially in the maxilla. When it's done correctly, in the maxilla we got poor bone, right? We should splint. Don't have the room. They're prone to flat fracture. How many times do you repair these things over the life of these restorations? So what are you going to do? And most of the time we're choosing, cheap materials for them because we're seeing them as an economical restoration as well. The acrylic. So we have a system today, guys. We have a Lego dentistry system in the manner that you can stack this stuff up digitally, maintain it, make it efficient, make it strong, effective. And if you utilize it properly, it's great. Now, the one thing that I didn't talk about on the RP4, RP5 slide was the difference. What's the difference between those types of restorations? One's implant retained and implant supported, RP4. RP5 is implant retained but tissue supported. Okay, there's a big difference there, guys, and we're going to show the difference and why it makes a difference in these types of restoration and why we would choose one over the other. So here's a cool little demo on a case and how we manage it. And before I start this little video, we look at an IO scan of 6 fixtures in an arch form that looks rather well placed and good AP spread. Well, why the hell are we going to do something that comes out of the patient's mouth on something like this when it could be fixed? Well, what you can't see is the transition line in this little slide. You can't see that she needs a flange to hide this stuff. And you can't see that she's already had a fixed restoration that failed. So this is our solution. The easiest thing is we have multiple scans already of what she's been functioning with. It's very easy for us to create a substructure, essentially append that to the model, bring it back in, and make a denture over the top of it. Simple. It's like Legos, guy, just snaps together. Simple little reline and you have a real nice product that the patient, doctor is going to pick up the housings in. Super fast, efficient, strong. But most importantly, you have a copy of this digitally, so when a retread becomes necessary, all you got to do is mill out the teeth again and connect the dots. Snap it together, just like Legos back when you were a kid. And the cool part about this aspect of it is that it's so stable. And while this restoration would still be classified as an RP5, as a tissue-supported appliance because of the resiliency of those attachments, this is going to be the closest thing to a fixed-feeling patient-removable appliance. Sometimes even better than a bar appliance in that regard because you can constantly maintain the retention by snapping in new housings. The Novalock system is a powerful system that is unique because it has a prefabbed 15-degree angled corrected abutment. Just screws right in. You got an extra 15 to create the challenges that we have with draw. So what are some of the misconceptions now that we know that it can be great, right? Well, let's make them great again. So they're going to be a great solution. Why? I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. What the hell? You got a big gummy smile. How are you going to hide that with a fixed restoration unless you're taking 15 millimeters of bone here, right? Let's get some fixtures in there. Let's save what she has, raise that transition line and hide it. Elongate those teeth and you can make something really nice. They need a flange, guys. Most of the time, these atrophic ridges are going to need to be modified. Nothing's worse than doing a fixed restoration on an atrophic arch and making a big anterior cantilever, what I call a balcony, and try to transition it back to the ridge so that it's hygienic in a fixed restoration. How do you do that? You're making a compromise, right? I do it all the time. Sometimes it's forced to do it. But lip support allows you to add a flange in a manner to correct these challenges. And the biggest one, guys, think about it. These people didn't get to this position because they've taken care of their teeth. They can't clean it. You got to give them a leg up. Can you imagine Mrs. Smith after a meal can go to the bathroom and just pop the thing out and rinse it? Maybe they'll do that. They certainly can't do this with this. They can't keep it clean. It's disgusting. No matter how perfect I make an intaglio, if you have patient habits that are going to necessitate that they're not going to keep it clean, you got to give them a leg up. It's our job. We give them an option for this. But the most important part that drives treatment today is cost. Everybody knows that, and oftentimes the surgeon makes his money, kicks it to the restoring doctor, and the restoring doctor presents, and there's just no money left in the restoration for this thing. So they present a less attractive option in their mindset. I think it's a great option when presented properly. So the cost always has a dictating factor in our relationship with our client and the patient, right? So what do we need to do? What do we need to look for? How are there going to be certain things that you can discuss with your client about making successful restorations? Well, we all know that in the maxilla, splinting is ideal. We want to splint restorations. The quality of bone that we have to work with in the maxilla is nowhere near as nice as the mandible. So there's a reason why most overdentures on locators or any individual abutment will most likely fail, because the AP isn't managed. We get AP rock, we're going to wear out those attachments, so you have to plan for support. So as I mentioned, the bone density, AP really dictate the type of restoration you should do. Aside from the dimension that we have to work with, you got to look at this stuff. Oftentimes, we get into the equation so far after the implants are placed that we don't have the options, but we have to look for solutions with where we're at. So I like to say that the minimum fixtures for an overdenture in the maxilla should be 3 in a fashion that is at least in a triangle format. It keeps that denture from rocking AP, front to back, anterior, posterior. 4 is better. And if you get more than 4 in there, you're going to lock that sucker in so good that they're going to be thrilled. But literally, if you have a 2-fixture overdenture in the maxilla, you have 2 things that are going to happen. 1, that patient's going to be back there every 3 months to change out the plastic housings. And if you don't reline it, you're going to torque those fixtures out of the bone. It just happens. So I always recommend, if you're going to talk to your doctors about the types of restorations that you can do, you have to change the idea set on how some of the functional aspects are going to dictate the longevity of that appliance. Have realistic expectations, present appropriately, and you're going to have happier patients. So this little picture is a simple solution, and I brought this in specifically because a lot of people don't think about making multiple different types of attachments in a restoration. You might look at this and see a couple mini implants off the distal. And what this was a failed all-in-4 case, and initially they put 4 locators in there. And they couldn't get it to draw properly. Even with the extended range and all this stuff, they were having tremendous issues with this darn denture. So I reviewed the case, I talked to them about it, and I said, well, let's put a radicular style attachment on the terminals. A radicular style is just a round ball style, because what it allows you to do is take that ball attachment and rotate it. You can rotate it to a 0 degree, so we'll match the adjacent locators. So now your draw is going to be straight up and down. You don't have to click it one way or have any path of insertion. So you can do these cases with multiple different type of attachments and aid the patient in longevity in life. They're not going to wear out those attachments super fast anymore. It's going to come up and down, click in and out, and it's going to have a very rigid connection there. It's still an RP5 restoration, but it's reinforced in a manner and has the retention that will last rather than snap in and out 3 months, have to pop in new attachments. It's just a good solution. I bring it to your attention because I use this routinely when I get poorly placed cases. This case initially was an all-in-4, again, failed. Patient couldn't keep it clean, she hated it. She says, give me a denture. So they started with the locators, and of course they didn't realize trouble, and this is the 3rd appliance that was made for them. Brought me in, and she's thrilled today. All right, here's another crappy case. So look at this bar. Okay, this is an old style Dolder bar, and back in the day when they were done properly, They would do one clip in the middle and some sort of attachment off the distal, and it would rotate around the axis, and you would have, a stable appliance. So when it comes into my lab, this scan, we're very fortunate. It's a pretty damn good IO scan to get that extension back to the retromolar pads. A little short in the peripheries, but you know what? We got all this retention up front. What the hell are we going to do? So this is breaking the rules, guys. I love to break the rules when it's appropriate. So now we're taking this restoration and more or less turning it into something that is implant retained and supported, which is contraindicated with that big, long cantilever. How can I get away from this? How do I get around it, and why would I even consider this? I can tell you. So what we did that was a little bit different is we used the power of CAD to offset this bar, so once we put that resilient attachment in it, it's still going to have rotation. Looks rigid, right? It has enough pivot to this that it's going to act like a resilient interface, and the saving grace is it was opposing another denture. It's the only reason I would do this. If it was a fixed something, natural teeth, or some sort of fixed bridge, it's a death. It's going to just kill it. The caveat also is this lady's 95 years old. And I asked the really tough question. I said, is it a young 95? And he laughed, of course. But, the truth is, guys, we have to have realistic expectations. I guarantee this appliance will outlive her. Those implants were still in good condition, so I'm not worried about it. But I want to empower you to make the right decisions based on all the data. That's what we're here for. We're going to look at data and analyze it in a manner that will be deeper than just what the prescription says, right? So here's the fun part as we move forward in this lecture. We're going to talk about what I call the one coordinate challenge. So often in the digital realm, we know that an STL will come in, it's in a certain alignment, and it's in alignment to another STL, essentially an upper and a lower, and each of those scans have an individual alignment to one another, but they have a world alignment that is aligned together, correct? So that relation is the relation that when we do these complex cases, we need to maintain, understand, and learn how to exploit, right? So here's another cool overdenture case, and I show these cases, guys, because hey, maybe you guys aren't removable techs. Maybe you guys aren't looking at these types of things and looking at the functional aspect of it and how we can make these things last. All of these renders are real STLs. They've just been colorized in a cool program to make them look a little bit more bold up for presentation. But literally, I'll tell you how this case starts in my laboratory. So literally, this was a gypsum case that came to us. Started with an odd thing that I do in my laboratory, verification jig. Most of you guys do that. I'm just joking, but most of my stuff comes in digital today. I don't do as much analog of gypsum pores, and this was one of the ones that we made a jig for. Sent it out, made a bite rim that sleeved over the top of it, came in, and I had it mounted, and good data from the doctor. Photos showing all of this stuff. We didn't do a try-in. We didn't do jack shit after the fact that we brought this information in and trusted it. Sounds risky, huh? Yes, sir.
What type of connections are those? Is that implant level?
Yeah, it's going straight to the fixture. Non-engaging.
Yeah. Is it conical connection?
Yeah. So when you look at a fixture like this, you wonder, how the hell is that going to draw, huh? Is that what you were thinking when you see it? Okay. So again, when we're doing these types of things, we're making a jig, we're going to use a non-engaging part, and we're going to validate the draw based on that conical connection. That's what the jig is for. Aside from giving us passivity, it's testing out our theory that we can go direct to fixture without multi-unit. Well, bars, most of them go straight to fixture. This is another failed case. I've made a really great career, guys, and winter is coming. It's going to be even worse. There's so much poorly done all-in-X treatment today that there's going to be a world of new stuff coming through to fix up. But this is another failed all-in-4 case. They lost a fixture. And now I can't support a full arch on that. It's impossible. They're not going to put another fixture in. It's done. At this point, this is the Hail Mary on the last thing to give them some illusion of a fixed feeling restoration. And what's unique about this case is the digital format and how I got to this position. And I'm talking long-winded over this because it has merit. This is a traditional hater bar style case, but what's unusual about it is it's a rounded bar. How do we make the radius and still maintain a clip that's square to snap on there? You guys didn't see that, did you? Just looks pretty. It was all done in CAD. So once I've designed my occlusion based on that bite and my verification jig, I'll digitize that. Digitize the model and I'll design a quick denture just to know where the denture teeth are going to be, the incisal edge position based on the bite rim and the photos that we received. And I make a digital order with that. I save that. I have that as my wax up now. I bring it back in, I design a bar. And the bar allows me to design from the standpoint that I need to have support and strength in my final restoration. I need space, right? So if I know where the incisal edge is going to go, it's going to allow me to overcome the challenges first. So I design the bar, bring it in, I digitally add attachments to the bar, finish that up, save that STL, combine it to the first file, and now I'm jumping around doing a bunch of stuff, and I'm all maintaining that one coordinate that's super important because I need everything to align back to the single scan that I started with. I make my secondary, come over the top of it. It's blocked out perfectly in order to draw to allow me to snap the attachment into the secondary. There's no acrylic on the inside of this at all. And then I append that design to the model as well, and I go back into my original denture model, bring that as my scan in, and reset the spline, cuts to it, and Bob's your uncle, I'm done. All I gotta do is snap this sucker together at that point. It's literally bonding to this simple little reline in the posterior, and that restoration is solid as a rock. It snaps in, it feels good, and it rocks. It's awesome. I believe that these types of restorations should be exploited more. They have a lot of power, and I like to talk about them. I'm a denture guy at heart. That's where I started, and I believe that that should be utilized more today in full arch dentistry. So we're going to talk about Blender for Dental. There was a nice little funny slide before that. I don't know what happened to it, but essentially what it was looking for a logo for this particular company. And in any event, if you're not familiar with Blender for Dental, I utilize it for one thing in my laboratory. Every restoration that I do fixed today as we move forward and talk about bars and sleeves is done with a prototype. I get it to contour, I deliver it to the doctor, and I want to maintain the information that I've designed. So when I go forward to the definitive restoration, I can mimic the intaglio identically. These are the hot new things, and realistically is the gold standard, in my opinion, for full arch dentistry today utilizing zirconia. It simplifies a lot of things. It adds a little cost, but I'm telling you that I have better results with a bar and sleeve than using tie bases today, in my opinion. And the reason why is because it allows me to overcome some of the challenges that full arch will present. But what's great about this program, it's quick. You don't have to redesign anything. You take that finished STL, bring it into the program, and very easily segment out a bar from it in a few clicks. You're not redesigning everything, guys, and you're maintaining the perfect parameters of the intaglio that you've already managed. So a lot of these cases that I'm showing here are all cases we've done realistically in the last 6 months or so, and you can see some of the challenges on this case. This lady really needed to have less teeth, but she had a buccal corridor that was showing. Doctor wanted to just do it in zirconia, and I just said, no, it's gonna fracture. It's got a 2-teeth cantilever, I don't feel comfortable with it. Let's go ahead and put a bar on this. Would it probably been okay in zirconia? Yeah, maybe. But it's very easy for me to do this now. And what we find on this is the asymmetric AP that we get on a lot of these cases will invariably have a stress point. Terminal fixture on the right side there has a much longer cantilever than the opposite side, and invariably we find that a fracture point is going to be distal to that terminal abutment on that side. So while the dimension of this was probably fine, it's a little more insurance that I go ahead and do, and I would much rather bet on physics rather than hope. But here's the most important and powerful thing about using this system. We have really big cases. These atrophic arches that are coming up are literally big dimensions, long reaches. This is a pterygoid case going all the way back, and you can see how hard it is to reach those places. Can you imagine milling that in zirconia and having those thin dimensions? And here's the third real reason that I value this type of workflow. So often today we're using angled screw channels for tie bases, right? So how do you have an angled screw channel in a bar? It's difficult. Not everybody's milling those. It's very hard to mill an angled screw channel in a bar. But if you remember, we're taking a static STL that we've used the pattern for. It's very easy for us to replicate the same thing. And there's nobody on this planet that says it's impossible to cement a tie base into a metal substructure. Is it counterintuitive? Well, maybe. But if you don't have the strategy to mill an angled screw channel in a bar, it's a very solid solution, and it's not going to give you any issues at all. This unit here, you can see very clearly had, they needed to probably put 17s on those anterior two fixtures, and I'm angle correcting almost 22 degrees on those front two fixtures, and it allows me to make something strong and effective that is going to overcome the challenges that have been presented to me. That's my job. Find ways to solve solutions. So as we move forward into this big case that I'm going to talk a long time about, I want to talk to you about this gentleman here. He is the real reason why I'm still practicing dentistry today. After doing dentistry as long as I have, you start to lose a little bit of passion, you lose a little bit of specific drive to do the best that you possibly can. You lose face on the fact that not everybody cares the same way that you do. So when you connect with a client that gives everything and expects everything from you in return, I've connected with that tenfold. He's a wonderful man, good father, amazing surgeon. He's just been a really true partner to me. Talk to him more than my wife. He's just an amazing clinician that has been a true partner to me in my laboratory. And with that comes the case. So we restore hundreds of cases a year, all full arch from this office here. And one morning, I think it was a Tuesday, 5 o'clock, I get this image pop up in my WhatsApp. He says, "Hey, John, great news. We're going to restore this case. It's going to be an upper and lower. It's going to be fixed. And we're going to do something we've never done before." And I go, "Whoa." Okay. He says, "We're going to do a subperiostinal, and I want you to take care of it for me." And I go, "Sub? What the heck? I haven't done a sub since 1990-something, and it was a crappy sub at that time. We were waxing and casting on stone plaster models indexed from open surgeries. It's horrible, very difficult to do." And I did like 3 or 4 more after that, and they were all just as shitty. And so I was really glad that I got away from that. Yeah, so they do an open flap back in the day. They would actually open the jawbone, take the tissue away, and take plaster of Paris to go right down to the bone. This was before CVCT segmentation. And then you would pour into the plaster another reverse plaster, and that was your model. Then you would turn that to a refractory and wax it up and make a casting. Very difficult, very inaccurate, very difficult to really know where the nerve was. You're just looking at it. So anyhow, back into the real world now. I got to figure out how I'm going to do this. So what am I thinking? Go back to that Lego dentistry thought, right? We're going to have a lot of different ways to stack it up. I just got to maintain that one coordinate, guys. But I need to get the records to start on this case. So what kind of records do I really need? I think you're going to be shocked when you see how simplistic this can be. Oh, here it is. Where the hell did that slide come from? But anyhow, I'm a fanboy for this company. I think they've done some cool stuff. So just segment back, take a picture of that, go to that thing. If you're looking for this bar segmentation software, it's a solid choice, and that's my unpaid advertisement for them. So let's talk about the records and what we're going to need to get started on such a really daunting, challenging case. Well, like everything, we have to review this stuff. This is a very difficult case. You look at her and you see collapsed bite, nasty dentures. Really collapsed bite. And you can see how flat the floor of the mouth is. It kind of now makes sense when you look at that CBCT. Nothing there. So the maxilla looks like there's a little bone, but I can tell you that's butter and a lot of thick fibrous tissue there. There's nothing really supporting. You saw in the CBCT, there was really very little there. So the goal, we're going to do a fixed on the top. It's going to be an all-on, I think we did 5. Yeah, it was 2 pterygoids, 2 zygos, and a transnasal. Super difficult surgery, guys. Very hard. So how do we get the records? What do we do? She's got some dentures, right? So we can get some data off of that. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to reline these dentures with a radiopaque material, green mousse, so that it's going to show up on the CBCT, because my goal is I got to know where my intaglios are in relation to that bone. I got to be able to skirt that information. So I need to be able to see how that aligns up. So this is the rendering. Essentially, this is the inside. If you ripped out the reline of those dentures, that's what you'd see, right? So it gains the aspect, so it allows me to take my interoral scans and align to my CBC scan in a relation that is going to give me the tissue dimension that we have there. So it gives us a leg up to start our design. It's all based upon, visualizing setting teeth in a negative space, and goes back to those denture principles that I told you are so paramount to my success today. I've set hundreds, thousands of dentures probably in my career, and taking a central incisor and place it with the information that the doctors provided, and sometimes no information. It's based on wisdom. So as we move forward today, we're utilizing facial scanning to be able to aid us in this type of placement. Yes, sir?
Who makes that scan of that CBC impression material?
It's Parkel, I believe. That's the same people that do blue mousse and green mousse. So, okay. So it's radiopaque. It works really good. A lot of, I shouldn't say this, but there's many PVS that will show up. But that one is like a medium body. It works pretty good for this type of stuff. Truthfully, we want to have a little more tissue compression on these types of scans, so the thicker the material, sometimes better. It's harder to work with. You don't get as much accuracy, but we don't care if it flows to the peripheral roll. It's inconsequential if I'm going to make something that's coming from the crest to the ridge. We want something that's going to actually compress the tissue. I want to have negative space so that when I make it and it's taller, I have a little more room, right? It's no stupid question, sir. Yes. Yeah, they added some filler in there that does something. All right, so this is our starting point. After we've aligned that information, I'm going to make a simple wax up. Okay, I'm just using the dimensions. There's going to be no plasty on this case, or very little plasty, so I can get a very close representation of where I'm going to finally finish up, right? So I do a simple wax up in the denture designer. We're going to segment this treatment, not because I don't think the surgeon can do both arches in one day. It's because I got to buy some time and figure out how the hell I'm going to do this. So I asked, let's do the upper arch first while I figure out how to do the sub. All right? So day of, we have all this information. All I need now is the implant coordinates, because I'm going to line back to that one coordinate. So I'm not going to go into detail on how we do that, but essentially we come up with a prototype. So the very next day after the surgery, after she places a very difficult surgery up top, we're delivering a prototype up top and a denture that was all done digitally. based on that design. And she goes away for 6 months, and I'm figuring it out. So this treatment took about a year, almost a year and 3 months now, start to finish. So let's talk about the design file for this sub. It's crazy, guy. My goal on this was, I'm not casting this sucker. I'm not going to do it. I'd love to be able to chuck this to somebody that could do selected laser melting on this and be done with it. But I'm going to do something unique that wouldn't allow. You see, on this particular case, we're going to do something that is unusual for a sub. We're making it fixed. Not the sub, but the actual prosthetic. Most subs today have a removable appliance that snaps in with O-rings and some sort of resilient attachment. We're going to go crazy and make this thing fixed. So my goal when I'm doing all of these types of alignments and setups is to use my denture background to look at morphology and to place teeth appropriately for function. It's not just resembling some sort of denture. It's a real functional appliance that occlusion is dictating placement. So my goal on this, like every other appliance that's going to be fixed in the mouth, is to try to make it as hygienic as possible. And you got to realize what you're seeing here in the rendering is something that can be milled. So my design is based upon the limitations of the mill and how I'm going to get it out and what kind of handwork I have to do to it after the fact. So there's some compromises everywhere. And this is the final digital rendering of my plan. And even though the upper arch was staged and done before, I have that one coordinate to bring all this extra data back to align. It's a known coordinate. It allows me to do this. So here's the hardest part, and this is the part, the pitfall. This is the part that probably gave me more gray hair. So when I started thinking about how to make this case fixed, it was all about dimension. If I make that bar thicker, well, then the prosthetic is going to be thinner. I have certain space to work with, and the easiest way to maintain this was to make just a flat bar and maybe drill and tap and make a simple prefabbed multi-unit abutment go into that bar. Seems easy, right, guys? So as I reviewed the cross-sectional dimensions of this bar in this configuration, I realized that I was going to weaken the bar to the point that there was a prone fracture for each one of those multi-units if I drilled and tapped. So I came up with the wild idea, well, why don't I just mill these damn multi-units as one part of this bar? That's not easy, guys. And there's certainly no library out there that is easy for me to slap this in there. Just doesn't happen. Yeah, 6 clicks. You're right. So I think I'm just a smart guy, and this is my solution, and I'm coming up with a way to look at the data. Okay, how am I going to get this attachment in there? Because essentially that's what you do inside of 3Shape. Any odd, different thing that you want to bring in, you bring it in as attachment, you make it work. So, this is already made. I can just go to any DME and pull an analog file and turn it into attachment and bring it into my bar, combine the output, and make an STL that is millable. Sounds awesome, easy, smart. The only problem is those suckers that made those designed for that analog oversized the analog without telling me. So here's the biggest problem. Like all of us that have complex cases that come down to the wire, we mill this out, we have it done, and my goal is I'm going to tap this bar. I'm then going to put it back on the model, and I'll scan it and validate that my one coordinate is accurate. And then I'm going to be able to, in the mouth on surgery day, much like we do our other cases, put it in, take a scan body scan of the coordinates, and connect the dots for next day delivery. That was my plan. That's how we were going to do it. And when I figured out that no part was going to fit on this bar, what the hell do I do? Patient's coming in 2 days. So now I got to be the smarter guy. We had to figure out what we were going to do for the prototype, and then buy some more time to figure out what I'm going to do for the definitive. So that's only one part of the equation and struggle on a case like this. Imagine camming this type of thing and getting it off the mill in titanium. It's a big ass disc. It's 20 millimeter size disc in titanium. So the camming is exceptionally difficult to replicate the pattern. I can get something that looks like this, but it has to fit. I have no real way to validate it, except for the printed model, which I don't flip and trust. And we segmented out of the CBT, which I don't even really trust. So now I have to really replicate this pattern to know that I'm in the right position based on that information. Barely squeezing it in there. I had to actually surface the holder of the thing so it wouldn't crash the mill. Big tilt to it. A lot of sacrifice in this case, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but I was going to be damned if I couldn't figure this out. This guy has been giving everything to me. I was going to give everything back. And I get it. So you can see the handwork that was done. We had the actual bone screws. I asked him to send it to me so I could countersink them. And the painstaking task to hand tap titanium was arduous and stressful. You snap a tap off in there, it's a done over. You'll never get it out. You're done. I think it was 3.5 hours to tap 4 fucking screws. Sorry, guys. And the entire time, I'm scared. I have no margin for error that I can't repeat this job. There's not enough time. But I get it. And we go through all the steps, and all my hard work and effort and hours of passion put into this, it shows. Just skirting that bone just perfectly, right above the nerve. All done in my lab. I'm fortunate to work with some amazing people, and I can't take credit for everything that comes through. I think it's a team effort. I like to give credit to the people that work with it. Min came in on the backside of this restoration and was very helpful in finishing up. We had some very tough strategies that had to overcome, and we're just getting to the point where we're going to finish this case. So wait until I show you what happens. So this is the plastic prosthetic that goes through, and you might say, well, how are you connecting that to it? Are you going direct to it? Well, yeah, I had no flipping choice. And there's no library, so how did I segment this out? How do I do that, guys? Well, it's all in CAD. You know, you're more or less doing a subtraction from it and adding your own screw seats. And you pick a screw that actually gives you more room to make the screw seat thicker. So we use the uni abutment screw. It's like 4 or 5 threads longer. It's a little more robust screw, and it allows us to make the plastic thicker. But this thing is so flippin' over engineered, it's laying on that bar, it's sleeved on both sides, there's no lateral load, it's huge. It's unlike just being held in by the multi-units, it's being held in by the side of the bar as well. It's never coming off. It's easy. And then my goal to make the intaglio perfect to this is met. It's milled out. We add a little bit of composite on here, bull it up, and we're going to evaluate and pray the bite is correct. And of course it's not. And surgery day comes, any flaps are open, and invariably on every tough case there's going to be a problem. And of course the difficulty in the CBCT was recognized. We got it very close to the original position, but very close isn't accurate. And this is what happens. So we got the bite off, guys. It's running downhill. And in this picture, it looks worse than it is. It hasn't been equilibrated at this point. Her goal was one thing, straight teeth and white, whiter than white, and no pain. So we start to do some creative stuff. Reimagine the VD, and all I'm thinking is it overclosed. And the tissue heals, and we're ready to start to move forward. You can see that the bar and the extension was shortened. Doctor was a little rough-handed on this. I think he was a little frustrated that day. I think the suturing on this was something unique to him. I know we hadn't done one of these before, but I can tell you right now, he was a master at it. And you're going to see what happens to the tissue response here. And this is 8 months after that prototype is in. And it's pretty decently clean. So she's done her homework on this. And now we're ready to restore in zirconia, both arches. So this picture right here for the final records, as we go through, you want to look at this. And if you imagine what this is and look at the ramus there up on the left-hand side, that's where that big pad is screwed in. And look how that tissue response is. It's perfect, healed up perfect. You would never know that there was something there, right? That extension coming up is the support that comes through the tissue. Tissue overgrown a little bit on some things, and I think he was a little overzealous in adjusting the prototype down in those areas when he was putting it in initially. But it's not a problem. We took this information, I modified the pattern as well. Upper arch, beautiful. Documented, just awesome. You can see the trajectory of the zygos. Everything is cleaned up great. Pterygoids are there, that one single transnasal, and the tissue response is beautiful. She's going to be able to keep this clean. So now we got to take this information and see our negatives and fix it. How do we fix this? Is it a design over, do over type of situation? I sure as heck hope not. I think I'm a little smarter than that. So let me show you some pearls. All right, so now we got to think about something in a different manner than maybe you really think about. Well, what is occlusion? How is the relation? Is the relation from one arch to the other? Well, obviously. But more importantly, when you have a fixed restoration, it's one static arch, the known arch, to the dynamic arch, right? So if you can know where you're starting at, you can find out where you need to finish. So what do? So this is a segmented out of that STL of the bar in the known relation from the prototype, the starting point. And I'm going to take this information to show you a point here. So this is the adjusted prototypes combined as one STL, right? So I know that upper arch is fine. I don't have to do anything with it. It's perfect. So I'm going to align that back to the original arch. And if you know anything about alignments in ExoCAD, you're going to see in this order here, well, blue tells you it's good. All that purple shows you the composite that we put over the actual PMMA. So that's the difference in alignment. So now that I have the lower arch aligned to the original upper arch, I can take the combined output from my original prototype with the bar connected to it as one STL. Okay, think about this. And now I'm going to align that back to the aligned bite of the prototype. And all I'm trying to achieve here, guys, is to recognize my error in the position of the bar from surgery day, from pre-surgical records to surgery day. And that's what this shows. Doesn't show too much though, but it's enough to show where the error was on it. He didn't seat the anterior aspect of that sub perfectly to the design, and the posterior was up on one side. Resulted in the cant and the actual malocclusion to the midline. So now I'm not redesigning. All I have to do is take the original wax up that I had for that prototype. It's in the spatial coordinate at this particular point. I don't have to change any of that. I just need to cut it to this bar. Are you guys getting this, or am I? Okay. So here's the rendering. This is what I do. This is how I get around it. So the coolest part of this case is I still had to come up with a way to connect the dots. How am I going to connect the dots? I'm certainly not going to go direct to fixture. I can tell you, maybe many of you guys mill zirconia and go direct to the multi-unit as a final restoration. Some are using these fancy flipping new screws that are supposedly making things easier. Winter is coming, guys. All those things are going to be breaking. I'm sorry to say that. So for me, I will never mill anything that doesn't have a one-to-one relation off the mill, that has a volumetric change, and trust it to be passive. It's just not going to happen in my lab. I'll never do it. So I got to find a way to over-engineer this thing. And how am I doing that? Again, I go back to that software for Blender. All I have to do is once I cut the original pattern to the bar, just like I did with the prototype, I bring that STL into Blender and I segment out that second bar right there. So now I have a way to screw it into metal to metal interface, and a cemented top to this, all based on one coordinate. That's pretty badass if I don't say so for myself. So this is how it comes out. And I'm glamming over a lot of parts of the equation because I don't have another 4 hours. But I'm telling you, to get to this position was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And the machining elements for this type of secondary was daunting. I think my mills are pretty good. I think we have a pretty good understanding of CAM, and milling titanium and having 90-degree radiuses like this to sleeve a bar with precision is tough. And then having to do the extra work. Well, I milled a second bar, not the whole sub, just a second bar. I could have printed it. I could have done a million things with it, but I wanted to have the raw metal so I could fit the secondary to it. And thank God I did that, because the first couple tries just did not fit perfectly. So we went to this, we got this, we finally got this, and now I have to make the final touches to make this look halfway aesthetic. Got to give credit to Min here. He loves photography. I love that he loves photography because I suck at it. So he's taken a few of these photos. Most of the photos that you're going to see here are from the doctor. He's another talented guy. I think Min has a little more artistic flair, but let's run through the final. So these photos are kind of blown out. It doesn't represent the tissue color very well. You'll see them when they get to the mouth. But again, we're using tie bases up top, and we have that sleeve on the bottom, and we're ready to rock them. He sends me some photos before the patient comes in, and the night before I did not sleep a wink. I wasn't sure. I doubted myself. I went through every aspect of whether or not this thing was going to work. And as hard as I worked on this, I still had fear. I'm not afraid of many things, guys. I just was afraid of letting this guy down and ultimately the patient on that day. So this little model that you see here was a virtual remount. We do kind of cool things in there just to validate things. When you're moving as many parts as we are, we want to mount these things and make sure that our movements are correct. This was a simple digital mount that we did and printed some models. We don't use them for anything other than a check model. All of the models that we use in full arch dentistry, since we're using full digital workflows, are made from our prototype. What that means is if I trust my accuracy off the mill, I'm going to assemble that prototype, screw analogs into it, and put it into a simple stone patty that has very low expansion stone. And what that's used for, guys, is my cementation. I don't trust that volumetric change of zirconia. So that check model, that stone model, allows me to use this cement as intended. What is the cement for? Is it just to retain? It's to allow true passivity, because it's going to take inaccuracy and make it accurate. So if you're milling anything one-to-one, that's why the bar path is that much better, because you're milling a one-to-one product that's not going to change, and it's going to fit the digital coordinates that you have. So the cement is your friend, guys. Use it. And I think I hit the mark. It's pretty flippin' white. Just some simple shots of it. I'm praying this thing fits. Another artistic Min shot here. And it goes to the mouth and it frickin' fits. Hallelujah. Almost. Like everything in dentistry, there's always trade-offs. There's going to see something that has happened here, and it's not going to be apparent when you first look at this. But since a sub is dynamic, it's laying on the bone is going to model. There is a chance that that sub is going to settle. And that's what it did. posterior aspect of that sub settled down just a little bit, and it threw off the occlusion just a smidge and allowed anterior harder contact that he had due to a little bit of equilibration. It's not the end of the world. Centric's right, midlines are coincident. Pretty darn good occlusion. But you can see I had to adjust those lower incisors a little bit for guidance. A little deeper than we like. Whenever we do these cases, they invariably get talked about how zirconia clacks together. Well, when that happens, the occlusion's off. So equilibration and function is dictated by your client's skill, right? I can do everything. I can do my hard work. If something's off in the mouth, it's either going to be a clinical remount that's going to come back to me that I'm going to work the functions on that articulator, or he's going to do some minor adjustments in the mouth. While I don't want them to touch it ever, that's my goal. It's not realistic, guys. The guys that don't touch anything don't care. And those people are going away with poor occlusion. So, she's happy. We got a really challenging, probably the hardest case of my life, delivered. And if you know anything about looking at a pan, this is the craziest pan you probably will ever see. And it's one that I can honestly say that this will go down in the record books of Sunrise Dental Lab. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys.